You're in the water loop.
Waterloop is a nonprofit media outlet made possible in part by a grant from Springpoint Partners. Visit waterloop.org. This is episode number 151, AI versus lead. Artificial intelligence has emerged as a powerful tool in the fight to find lead water lines in the U.S., which could number up to 10 million and pose a threat to human health. The use of AI allows for much more accurate predictions of the location of lead lines by using a variety of factors, such as the age of a house, size of the property, and prevalence in the area. This approach has helped cities like Newark, Detroit, and Toledo to dramatically reduce the time and cost of finding and replacing lead lines, as discussed in this episode with Eric Scwartz, CEO and co-founder of BlueConduit. Eric talks about how funding from the Rockefeller Foundation is allowing BlueConduit to provide free access to an inventory tool, launch a nationwide map of lead lines, and increase outreach to under-resourced communities. The conversation will begin in 1 minute, but first a word about our sponsor, Varuna.
Waterloop.
This episode of Waterloop is sponsored by Varuna, the decision intelligence tool for water systems. The factors that go into running water systems are more dynamic than ever, but the tools for making decisions are still static. That's why Varuna built a resilience tool that uncovers blind spots, identifies risks, and generates insights, which are all presented in a user-friendly dashboard. There are many risks that water systems have to mitigate. While EPA identifies 10 vectors of risks that water utilities should track, the Varuna Resilience Tool captures 26, including internal and external risks. The tool allows operators to take immediate actions and leaders to make long-term strategic decisions, and is especially helpful for smaller systems. With Varuna, better data means better decisions. Learn more at varuna.city and let them know you heard about it on Waterloop.
You're in the water loop.
Welcome to Waterloop. This is Travis, the host. Very happy to be joined for this episode by Eric Scwartz. He is co-founder and CEO of BlueConduit. Eric, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Travis.
So we're going to talk about kind of lead today and maybe lead versus AI, as I think this episode is titled. Before we launch into that battle a little bit, could you briefly explain the challenges of finding lead lines out there, which is a huge issue for this country, 10 million or more out there in the ground? Why is it so tough to deal with this?
Sure, and I appreciate you kind of recognizing the scope of this problem, Travis. And people often think about the scope, and we also can concretely see the way lead pipes can be removed out of the ground. Seems easy. You just go and dig and remove them and replace them with copper. But the challenge is we don't actually know where all the lead pipes are. We know we have them, and they're buried underground. And so what we do know is largely based on these outdated records, which are sometimes hand-drawn maps and books of atlases, or on index cards and file cabinets in the basement of City Hall. We've seen many of these, or maybe they're actually now digitized in GIS databases, but they're based on those. Those don't necessarily reflect the reality underground. They're not the ground truth, so to speak. And often they're incomplete. So they may just not have a lot of records for a lot of homes. Maybe they only have records for homes that have had renovations or recent, somewhat more recent construction. Or very often there's actually an issue of there are two sides of the service line. There's the portion that goes from the water main to the curb stop or to the water meter, and then there's the portion that is usually customer or homeowner owned, house side. And the utility usually doesn't have good information on that part, the latter part, the home side. And so for all of these reasons, we just don't have this information the way we have information about other aspects of the water infrastructure, like water mains.
And so now we're sitting in 2022 and we've got the power of technology. And this is what I'm excited to talk to you about. So instead of just digging around a community and pulling up pipes and seeing what they're made of or trying to dust off these paper records, there is this other approach that you all have really been pioneering with artificial intelligence, machine learning. Boil that down for me. How does that work? How are you approaching this problem with AI and those associated tools?
Sure, and I appreciate the kind of PB versus AI, lead versus machine learning story here. Because we really my co-founder Jake Abernathy and our chief data scientist Jared Webb and I early in this whole journey, we're having conversations with community members and officials in Flint in 2016. And we realized that to answer a simple question of how many lead pipes are there in Flint after the international news media came and left was still very difficult. And it's because of the uncertainty caused by all of these old records and lack of record keeping for decades meant that we just didn't know. And the moment we hear as data scientists, we have some information, but we don't know most of the information, that's a perfect prediction problem. So let me explain what that means. We resolve that uncertainty by finding patterns that are connected with homes that likely have lead, and then we extrapolate and we predict for all the other homes for which we've not yet verified. The city and its contractors have not gone and inspected the materials. What's the likelihood that each of those homes has lead based on the age of the home, the location of the home, the size of the lot, the condition of the home, all the other variables that we actually do have based on tax records about the parcel of land or existing water tests, all of that, we're able to pattern match and start assigning probabilities. So we might start understanding, well, there's an old historical record that says this home has a copper pipe on one side of the service line, but unknown on the other side of the service line. And we have water tests that say it's been 0 parts per billion. But we also see this home was built in 1920. We also see this home is on a pretty small lot. And other homes with these characteristics actually have a 70% chance of having a lead or galvanized steel pipe. And so we're going to use that information to make decisions and help the officials guide their contractors to go and dig.
Yeah. So take me a little bit into the tech wonkiness, if you will. People hear artificial intelligence, they start thinking of robots and stuff like that. But, how does this work? When you talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, could you just take us into the details a little bit there as it applies to this search for lead pipes?
Yeah, sure. Well, one way to think about that is we can start with the really basic model. So strip away the language, machine learning, and AI for a second. Let's just say that we just believe that the older a house is, the more likely it is to have lead. And actually, that's a very common and assumed models in people's head. Sometimes they'll just say anything built after 1986 has no lead. Anything before 1986, we assume has lead. Now, that is when the federal government banned the use of lead, but that's an imperfect rule. That's a model, right? We could have that model and start assigning lead versus not lead based on that. But we're going to make a lot of errors in both directions. Maybe the year that homes were built in this database is actually not that accurate. And it's only telling us when there was construction recently, but not the original build. Or maybe lots of these homes that we're claiming have lead actually don't. And we're going to waste a lot of time digging up these old homes that actually don't have lead. So what AI is doing is it's saying it's not just one variable, and it's not just a simple relationship like older means more lead, that there are lots of different variables involved, and it's the combination of them that's going to let us start getting better assessments, more granular than just older is more lead.
Gotcha. Now, you have done work in a couple of the big communities in this country. You mentioned Flint. I think you've worked in Detroit and Trenton, New Jersey. Could you talk a little bit about how this has gone in those communities, what those projects have been like, and why it was so beneficial to take this, AI versus lead approach?
Yeah, and Trenton, Toledo, Detroit, soon to be just started in Buffalo. Really excited about partnering, collaborating with these communities. I'll walk you through Toledo first, and then I could kind of talk about some of the others.
Sure.
In 2020, Toledo began their program to replace what they had estimated 30,000 lead service lines. Now, they were going initially at a rate of about 1,000 per year, and it was expected to take, 30 years and cost over $60 million. Toledo has been using the information that we've been giving them based on our models. We're taking in data from Toledo, and they've been able to cut this by a significant amount of time, almost half. They're cutting 13 years off their timeline based on our predictions. And the reason they're doing that is they're using this to unlock federal funding. So we're providing estimates of how much lead service lines are in the whole city, how much are in different neighborhoods, how much are in specifically Justice 40 or environmental justice communities that are disadvantaged. And they're then using those environmental justice funds from the EPA to really supercharge their efforts. So one of the ways that we can help is really scope the problem and identify what types of neighborhoods it's really where the lead is. But another way is we're just able to get them to put the right folks at the front of the line. And that's important for equity and really cost effectiveness. So that the reason they're able to cut down the time that this is going to take is they're putting the lead homes first to make sure that they're getting as much lead out for every dollar they spend in these next few years. And that itself is really accelerating the pipe replacement. It's better allowing them to understand their data so that they can be more transparent and reliable when they make statements. And they can then also provide all of this to the public. And so there's now a public-facing map in Toledo and like there will be in many of the other communities that we work in, like there is in Flint that we've provided, that lets everyone know house by house. Do we know the material of both sides of your service line? If we do, what is it? And how do we know it? If we don't, what's the likelihood that it's lead versus not lead?
And just a little side question here. I think with machine learning AI systems, the more they work on something, the more data they get in, the better they get at figuring things out and predicting. Is that generally true?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the appeal is within a city, the more data we have, the more we learn, the better we can find lead, but also across cities. And that's something that we're really excited about right now at BlueConduit, because we're just at the point where we do have enough data from a variety of cities across 10 states, 50 plus cities, where we are now making predictions at the aggregate level for a whole water system. Even though we have not worked with a client in that water system, we now have estimates for every water system in the country. How many lead service lines do we expect them to have right now?
Wow.
Based on all of the available information that we have about that community and all of the information that we have about, all of the communities we've been working with in more detail about their service lines. And that is where I think there's a lot of power to some of these predictions to inform the way the states can start allocating their state revolving funds that are coming from the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act.
Yeah. Last question before we move on to the kind of big news that you all have. When you go into Detroit, when you go into Trenton, when you're going into Buffalo, who are you working with? Who do you have to kind of partner with and collaborate with on these efforts?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked this, Travis, because the obvious two that I think folks are going to appreciate, definitely utility or public works department and engineering firms that are there. And we are excited and happy to partner with those two, and we do. But the folks that we're really excited to partner with are the community organizations and these community hubs. So for instance, in Buffalo, we're working with the Heart of the City neighborhoods, Open Buffalo, and Citizen Action of New York. In many of the communities where we're working, especially the ones In fact, every single one where we're using money from google.org, we are working with community organizations and actually helping to provide them funding that we secured via google.org in conjunction with the NRDC and We Act for Environmental Justice. And the reason that's super important is, as you and the listeners know, the lead issue is a massive environmental health and environmental justice issue, and it is connected to and triggers all sorts of social issues and discussions about the social issues. How did we get here? Why is it still going on? And to engage communities in a real partnership instead of here's the plan, it's coming down on you community is really meaningful. And it's going to be the way to make sure that we take the lessons learned from Flint and apply them really well to other communities.
Sure. All right. So the big news, you guys have some exciting news at BlueConduit. I'm excited for you. It's awesome. Go ahead and share that.
Sure. Well, thank you. The Rockefeller Foundation has just granted us $1 million to scale BlueConduit's artificial intelligence and machine learning centered approach to identifying and removing lead pipes. And this is something we're super excited about because it's specifically helping us grow our free and open source software. And that's something that we're providing, this data analytics and software tools, and developing outreach programs in conjunction with these community groups that I was just referencing in under-resourced, disadvantaged communities, and building out, on top of all that, a nationwide interactive map where we're going to be focused on getting the lead out and really zooming in on different communities, but also showing that big picture and scorecard, as I was saying earlier, about being able to estimate the likelihood of lead service lines across the country. So really, thanks to this $1 million that Rockefeller is providing, which adds on to the $200,000 they provided a couple of years ago, adds on to the $1.5 million that google.org is providing, we're able to provide a free tier of our BlueConduit software, an open source lead service line inventory tool, and we're going to be able to launch this nationwide map and scorecard that will be public facing for the whole country to see.
Yeah. Awesome. Congrats on all of that. I want to dig into a couple aspects of it. So the idea that you're going to put this tier of BlueConduit out there that's free for some of these communities to use. How do you think that they can successfully use it? A lot of these places are not very well resourced, right? Or they've got their own challenges with staffing or budget or, that type of thing. Are your tools easy enough to use that they can just run with it? Or I think you kind of get what I'm going at there.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the challenges of even the enormous increase in budgets through the grant money that's coming down is their capacity in, let's say, smaller or disadvantaged or rural community water systems to really best absorb that. And I think similarly, we're being as thoughtful as possible to work with folks in those kinds of communities as we're developing this tool. And so this tool is not, again, going to be kind of just developed in a vacuum and then just put out in the world, but instead we're going to be really partnering with as many folks in community organizations and in utilities in these disadvantaged communities that would be the target for this, make sure that it's actually doing what they would need it to do in a way that would be actually useful. But let's be honest, that still will require some work and someone to engage with it. And these are individuals who are really strapped for time, and lead is one of 20 issues they're dealing with because they're not just the lead service line coordinator in these small communities. They're doing a lot of them. That's where I think the EPA technical assistance grants are really going to come in, and we're excited to help facilitate that by providing these initial estimates to those communities so they can at least ask for the right amount of money to get the EPA technical assistance, to get the right amount of SRF money coming in from their state so that they could build capacity and actually maintain that both staffing capacity and capital as needed. And that's something that we are excited to work with other recipients of EPA technical assistance, to work with their hubs of their centers for excellence that will be funded through that. And so we're really excited to work with them, to work with ASDWA, the Association of State Drinking Water Authorities, and all these rural community assistance partnerships, RCAP, who do a lot of train the trainer programs. So we'll be able to train folks who will then go on and train folks to use some of this software. So lots of different ways, but
you got a plan. You got a plan. That's for sure. Yeah. I got the impression that there's a little bit of, these communities self-identifying and reaching out to try to use the tool, like, hey, it's free out there. But also I got the impression that you all and maybe some of your other partners will be trying to identify and reach out from that direction to just, is that true that's there'll be a little bit of two-way effort?
Yeah, we are pleased to get inbound interest and do get it, but we absolutely are going out and certainly identifying areas and communities that really is classic environmental injustice markers, where you have, let's say, shrinking population. We've got kind of post-industrial, and we don't need to reinvent this. This is out there. The EPA has an environmental justice screening tool that's super helpful. The NRDC has put out different environmental justice markers that are helpful. And we're data nerds, so we are ourselves using census information and information about funding that's coming down from the IIJA versus estimated number of lead service lines, and seeing the mismatch at the state level, but also seeing the expected mismatch at the water system level. And so these are all ways that we are trying to approach and identify and assist disadvantaged communities. There are many ways that we can be identifying. But I think one interesting thing is that many states are now putting laws on the books to be consistent and reflect the federal definition of disadvantage in the IIJA, to kind of align those definitions to unlock the funding capabilities. And then a step further, others like the state of Michigan have actually introduced significantly disadvantaged as a subcategory, which I really commend, because the moment there's a title that says you can get extra funding, people will try to expand the definition of that title.
Right.
And it reminds us that we need to really continue to think about, no, what was the intent here? Who are significantly disadvantaged, not just nominally so.
Yeah. One of the other things you mentioned was this nationwide map. And, I'm like obsessed with maps. I get lost and spend a lot of time just exploring them. Obviously, I'm a water person. I love all these problems and data. So you've got something that's a convergence of all of that. Could you talk a little bit more about, what this nationwide map will look like and what benefits it'll provide?
Sure. And I appreciate that. We are definitely mapping and data visualization nerds here, and really proud to be bringing this kind of vision and dream to life. But before I say what it will look like and the benefits, I just want to call out, we are super excited that this is in collaboration with Google.org fellows, who are individuals who have chosen to take a pause on their jobs at Google, the for-profit, and do a fellowship at Google.org for a particular project. And several of them have chosen us, BlueConduit, for largely this project. So we're super excited. That's a 6-month long, and we're smack in the middle of it right now. So in a couple months, you're going to be seeing the output of that. But what will it look like? Well, the look and feel, it's going to be pretty similar to the look and feel of the maps that we already have out there. So if you go to flintpipemap.org, if you go to Toledo's lead service line replacement website, you'll see a bunch of maps that we like to think we're kind of tech folks doing the best in class, the best available tech with the public health expertise and public health communication that's needed to really kind of bring this down to earth in a meaningful way for communities. So that's kind of the look and feel. You'll be seeing initially aggregate information. So aggregate meaning for every water system, we'll be able to anyone will be able to type in an address and they'll get information about their water system at first. So the information about water systems might be, well, how many service lines are there total? And then we'll be providing a prediction. How many service lines do we estimate to be lead service lines? And that's really the big kind of piece of information that we're adding. We're going to add in the other information that the EPA provides, like recent health violations, violating the lead and copper rule, other recent water tests that have been either publicly disclosed by the EPA or by the state or by the city, but summarizing all of that really into a score. And with detailed information for those who want to drill down into it, but really as an assessment, is an A, B, C, something like that, rating system of how good is this water system doing in removing its lead. We're also going to be providing the demographics and the recent history. So how much lead has been out of the ground, has been taken out of the ground versus how much do we expect to be remaining in the ground. All of this really adds up to the benefit of we want people to be able to ask questions about their drinking water and get answers. How much lead is in my community? Can I stay up to date on how my community is progressing in getting the lead out? Eventually, how much funding do we have to do this? And how cost effective have we been in doing this, which we will track and work with partners to track. And finally, the calls to action that we're offering will be, well, test your water or order a filter or call a representative from your water system, and providing all of this guidance in addition to for action, in addition to all the appropriate public health messaging. So there's my broader, what will it look like? What will it benefit? Who's making this? We're super excited about this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the one thing through our conversation is you're not just out there kind of helping with a technical solution. Outreach and education for communities is a big part of actually what you're doing. So that's good stuff. Eric, yeah.
No, go ahead. Go for it.
No, I was just gonna say thank you very much. Really excited for you guys. Congrats. Known about you for several years now. Had a conversation with Jared a few years ago, and so it's great to see you all kind of get this great funding from Rockefeller and Google, and out there fighting the good fight, AI versus lead.
Thanks, Travis. We really appreciate it. We've been following Waterloop for a while before Jared was on the podcast, and since. So we appreciate the recognition and giving us this voice and platform. So thanks.
And when that nationwide map is out, I'm sure I will lose some of my time getting lost in it. But that's good stuff. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Travis. Bye.
Waterloop.
Thank you for listening to the podcast, and thank you to this episode's sponsor, Varuna. To find all episodes, sign up for email updates, and connect on social media, visit waterloop.org.
Waterloop, Waterloop, Waterloop.